There used to be a saying in Hollywood that if you want to send a message, call Western Union. Films are for entertainment. They're not to force you to think. They're not to be provocative in terms of social change. Well, gratefully, Stanley Kramer always ignored that line. If you want to send a message, call Western Union. If he wanted to send a message, he made a big and important film, and Hair at the Wind about the debate about evolution, The Caine Mutiny about cowardice and leadership, The Defiant Ones about black and whites getting along together under very difficult common circumstances, The Wild Ones about what happens to a community that is taken over by a gang of motorcyclists. I lost my job in a movie theater when that film was on the screen. I was the popcorn boy, and I kept abandoning the popcorn machine to go watch the film. I'll never forget, of course, Lee Marvin, and especially Marlon Brando. Then, in 1967, guess who's coming to dinner? This country was just emerging from the glory days of the civil rights movement, but the social realities of black and white relationships were yet to be a reality in this country. People were still uncomfortable when they thought about interracial marriage or even integrated dinner parties or social settings of any kind. Stanley Kramer, through the great artistry of Sidney Poitier and Hepburn and Tracy, of course, forced America to confront its own reality. He did it in a way that was at once engrossing and provocative and enduring. I was living in California at the time and spending a lot of my days covering the residue of the Watts riots, a city that was terribly segregated by neighborhood and by social class as well. But when Guess Who's Coming to Dinner came out, it forced everybody, black and white alike, to think about what our future should be and not just about what our past has been. So I'm happy to join in this salute to Stanley Kramer and his remarkable courage, his great filmmaking, and of course, his conviction that this country, in its own special art form, can deal with those issues that are most important to us in moving forward.
I don't consider this a film about interracial marriage, incidentally. I consider this a film in which I tried to transport you to a situation where a man met a woman, they fell in love, and they wanted to get married. One of them happened to be a Negro. Well, that made a problem. So I said, what do you do with a problem like this? And I introduced them into an atmosphere where I created all the facets of the problem for everybody to think about them and go along with them and identify with them. And they finally, on the basis that love conquers all. I haven't yet, in 35 years of filmmaking, been able to find a formula or a statement or a cliche which holds as closely to the line and stands up against every attack and every assail as the fact that love conquers all. And that's what this picture says. It says, look, everybody's got some objections, there are problems, everything else, but they're in love, for God's sake. What are you going to do about it? You can't do anything about it because they are in love.
The society without a focus, out of racial focus. But love conquers all. When that love is that big, it's proven that their love conquers all.
When Guess Who's Coming to Dinner opened, I got lots of death threats. And they were obviously from people who did not think that black people and white people should marry.
They were onto something good, something decent, something needed to be said, and they said it, and said it well.
I think that we were all influenced by the terrible tensions that were going on in the society at large.
Sidney said to Stanley, "Do you think the country is ready for this film?" And Stanley said, "No, but we're going to make it anyhow."
There was something about that movie that I think Mr. Kramer knew about. He did that in a lot of films, a lot of his films. Coming from Hell's Kitchen, we had passed that. We passed that ridiculous saying that it's not impossible for a black man to be in love with a white woman.
The race issue came up, but what I loved about it was that it was funny. There was a lot of funny in it, and that made it much more palatable, and I always copied that. If you want to say something a little serious, you make it a little funny.
This is quite a surprise. Yes, she's surprising in a lot of ways, Dad.
It was not the right moment for a hard-hitting, controversial film about race relations. It was the right moment for a comedy with depth and meaning and some complexity.
There are really two love stories in it. One is the scripted love story of a black man and a white woman.
I beg your pardon, lady.
Loves me not. And the other is a really true life story of the love affair between Spencer Tracy and Katharine Hepburn. And I think that in a way, that relationship almost overpowers the scripted relationship because it is so based in truth.
There were things that were going on in that period, rumors, and there were stories, and there were jokes and things that went across the nation in a very strange kind of way. But I remember hearing, maybe several times, this kind of thing that was said, which was, well, you know, integration is one thing, but would you want your daughter to marry one? And this film was an answer to that. A direct answer, would you want your daughter to marry one?
When Stanley was making It's a Mad, 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 Mad World with William Rose, they would have dinner every night. So Bill one night said, I've got an idea, Stanley. He said, what about this story of Africa? And this white girl is a reporter, and she comes to Africa, and this black boy, and she fall in love, and he asked her home to see his family. So he said, well, I don't think that's that interesting. He said, I tell you what, if you reversed it, and you made it into the United States, and a young girl falls in love with a black man, and her family is liberal, and she brings him home, then you've got a story. That was all that was ever said.
It's very, very hard to look at a William Rose screenplay without laughing and then crying. In other words, he had a very delicate touch, and life is filled with laughter and tears, and Bill knew this.
I haven't even told you his name. Mom, it's John Wade Prentice. Isn't that a lovely name? John Wade.
He had this idea about a very well brought up young girl in San Francisco who falls in love with a very handsome black man. She brings him home to dinner. I'm thinking about writing this, and I said, wow, that would be something, because I was working on In the Heat of the Night, and I was working on a film that also dealt with racism in America. And I said, well, since we're in the middle of a civil rights revolution in America, maybe the timing is right, because timing is everything in film. And I think Stanley Kramer knew that.
When he went to Spencer Tracy and he went to Kate Hepburn and he said, look it, I've got this idea for a story. We're writing it right now. What do you think? It'd be your 9th film together. And Spence said, I'm just too sick. I can't do this. And he said, Spence, you can either sit in that chair and rot until the end of your life, or you can get up and do something really important. Spence said, okay, I'll do it.
Stanley called me and said, I've got something for Sydney.
You know, I just had a thought. Why don't I go check in a hotel and get some rest, and you go find your folks and bring them.
Oh, John, you wanted to meet them. Let's go meet them. The sooner we get it over with, the better.
Sydney said, I haven't read the script, but let me tell you right now, I'm in.
I think because Sidney Poitier was probably one of the most sensitive and intelligent actors to come along. And with that kind of sensitivity and charm that he has, you know, he became really the first, I think, black movie star in a way.
Mom, this is John.
My mother, Marion, who was Kate Hepburn's sister.
I'm so pleased to meet you.
was very much of a humanitarian, and we were brought up that justice was extremely important. And my aunt called me up and said that I should go over to the Plaza Hotel and say hello to Stanley Kramer. So we met at the Plaza Hotel and had a long discussion about making movies. And he said that he hadn't decided who should play the girl. And it just never even occurred to me that he would be interested in me. But as it turned out later, he really wanted somebody who wasn't unknown and somebody who conceivably could look like Katharine Hepburn and Spencer Tracy. In fact, when Stanley said, "Do you think your niece can act?" my aunt said, "How the hell should I know? I haven't seen her since she was 6. So I don't think that was what is known as a vote of confidence.
Columbia Pictures said they would do the film. They didn't know the story. He said, "Look, I've got Spencer Tracy and Katharine Hepburn and Sidney Poitier." "What's the story?" they said. "Well, it's a love story," he said. "Oh, okay."
When you're making a film, and I think this was Stanley's challenge, about what was then, in 1967, a very controversial issue in our society, and we're still fighting it, he had to pick and choose his battles. And I think that he chose to dramatize the white situation as fully as he could without being heavy-handed.
The script was beautifully structured, beautifully written. I understood Guess Who's Coming to Dinner would be controversial. I didn't feel it was, to me, personally.
I think we knew we were doing something important. And then we all said, what's going to happen when word gets around, word of mouth says a black and white are kissing on the screen?
When we were in San Francisco, after the first day of shooting at the airport, I came back to the hotel and there was a call from my aunt. She said, "The film has been canceled." I said, "Really?" She said, "Yes, you're all going to come back and that's it." I said, "My God, well, what happened?" She said, "Well, Spencer cannot be insured and Columbia's canceling the picture."
I remember Stanley coming home that day, and I've never seen him so distraught. So he paces back and forth on the floor. He kept pacing and says, "I don't know what to do." And suddenly he said, "I got an idea."
Later, I found out that they had other reasons besides Spencer's poor health. They really didn't want to make the movie. They thought that America wasn't ready.
So he grabbed me by the hand, put me in the car, and we drove over to see Katharine Hepburn. And he says, "Look at Kate. I've got an idea. They won't go ahead with this film because they can't insure Spence. But I'm going to put up my salary as collateral. Will you do the same?"
The next morning, my aunt called me again. She said, "It's back on."
He said, "Well, you don't have to worry about the insurance. We've covered it. This is the collateral."
Then Columbia was caught because they were using that as their big argument for not having to make the film.
Mike Frankovich at that time was the president of Columbia Pictures. And in some strange, wonderful way, he understood what Stanley was trying to do here.
And Stanley, in his wonderful way, said, "Ready or not, here we come."
All hell's done broke loose now.
What's wrong? That waste disposal?
No, it ain't that, but you just remember I said all hell's done broke loose.
What's happened? Where's Christina? I see
She's
her
out
car.
in the terrace with little Joey.
With
and
Joey?
Somebody calls herself Dr. Prentice.
Doctor? There's a doc? Well, what's wrong? What's happened?
It was a very happy experience to know that this film, to the public, was very successful. However, doesn't mean that Stanley and I didn't have to pay the price for this film. Our lives were threatened many times because of it.
And the fact that he also received a lot of death threats, that the two of us should have been the ones to receive the death threats, says something about our society.
Sidney Poitier, as everyone commented at that time, was playing, a wonder of the world, the perfect man, not the perfect black man, but you expected the dinner to be interrupted at any moment by an announcement that he had won the Nobel Prize, and then, so what?
Well, he's an important important guy. Just the main points. Born Los Angeles, 1930. Graduated magna cum laude, Johns Hopkins, 54.
Was this a suspense movie in which the audience was wondering, is Spencer Tracy going to succumb? Is he going to come around? Of course not. That was the joke, and it was a good one. That Tracy was playing a face on Mount Rushmore. Tracy was playing a great American, and Sidney was playing a great younger American.
Visita mi canal.
Part of the issue for us as African Americans is that if we come into your home as a white person, that if I come in and I am a postman and I am a garbage man or someone, if I'm not a doctor, an attorney, a professional athlete, that you won't view me the same. I could be a good person, I could be a great husband and great father, but I somehow have to be better than everyone else. And I think that today, what is different now than in 1967 is that our thinking in the African American community is that if a millionaire athlete walked into your home as a white father and asked for the hand of your daughter, that you'd be more likely to say yes to him than you would to me as an established attorney or an established doctor.
Sidney's character was so successful, he had to make an exception that he was untouchable. So it was palatable. At least he's one of the best. If he's going to be black, he's going to be one of the best kinds of blacks.
I'm sure that at that time, if he had been someone who had worked in a restaurant, it would have been much harder for him to gather those families and to get that young lady's hand in marriage.
One of the things that Sidney and I talked about when we weren't in front of the camera was his role as a black man in entertainment. And he was extremely aware of the role that he played, that he chose to play above average people, noble, heroic figures. And he told me that he was being criticized by the black community for doing that, and that it was very, very hard for him because he felt to a certain extent, and I don't know if this would have been his word, that it was unjustified, that he, in his lifetime, in his career, had created a certain niche for a black man in cinema.
I think a lot of the stars today, you know, Denzel Washington and Whittaker, all these other stars today, black actors, Sidney kind of set the standard there. He broke through a lot of barriers, I think.
And he told me that he was not going to do much more acting, that he was going to be a director.
Sidney Poitier built his own career. He's a wonderful actor. He's a powerful man, and his career would be built, and he did build it apart from me, totally. We are very good friends in a kind of a mutual admiration society. More importantly, he taught me so much. He taught me as much as I could know and feel. When I see Poitier's pictures, which he's now directing, I realize what he was trying to teach me. He was trying to teach me the idiom and the real feeling and what I could do and actually do as a white man to say what the black man was thinking and feeling, which of course I never really could do.
This is an example of an awareness of what was going on in the society as a whole. We hadn't met Spike Lee and Lawrence Fishburne yet, but they were right around the corner, and he knew that. And he felt ardently, as did Stanley, that it was very, very important that this film was a comedy, even though that was risky to make such a serious subject comedic, but that the only way to make it palatable to fence sitters in the white community would be to make it into a comedy.
Until today, I would never have believed that I could say such a thing. But when she fights you, and for what it may be worth, I'm going to be on her side.
Well, I never would have believed I'd hear you say a thing like that.
Walt Disney used to say, cover everything with a little bit of sugar, it'll go down easier. But you can't cover race with sugar. You got to cover it with funny. And that's what they did in Guess Who's Coming to Dinner.
How deeply are you and John no, I have no right to.
How deeply involved? Do you mean have we been to bed together? I don't mind you asking me that. We haven't. He wouldn't. A girl like Joey is a concept. She's not a real girl. And it's very, very difficult to play an idea. I never really felt confident that I knew what I was doing. So to be able to really get a hold of a character for her was something I felt I never really could do. I never really did. I just simply tried to play each scene as truthfully as possible, knowing that it was untrue.
You may be in for the biggest shock of your young life.
After 23 years living in the same house with them, don't you think I know my own mother and father?
I hope so.
There's no problem. You couldn't have grown up in that family with a father who was the editor and publisher of a newspaper and a mother who ran a sophisticated art gallery and be as innocent as that girl was. So it was a pretty lie to begin with.